Hi there, I'm Greg Munden from Munden Ventures and Kamloops. Thanks for clicking in to listen to this reading of a blog that we've written regarding minimal levels of training standards for commercial drivers in Canada and why mandatory entry-level training, or MELT, will benefit the transportation industry. There's currently no minimum level of training required to become a commercial driver in most of Canada. And while that sounds absurd, the truth is that passing a road test and limited knowledge test is really all you need to do to hit the road in units weighing up to 63,500 kilograms or more. Even for those drivers who do go the route of training through a driving school, it's commonly agreed by trucking companies that even after graduating an accredited Class 1 or Class A/Z driver training program, most students are not qualified to actually enter the workforce as a driver. Oftentimes, driver training schools train students to a standard to pass the provincial driving test, in our case, which is administered by ICBC in British Columbia. Very much a minimum standard. This is no criticism of the driving schools. Offering training to a higher standard simply would have such little demand that it would not make business sense for them to offer it. The industry has been increasingly demanding the adoption of MELT, or mandatory entry-level training, a standard to increase the qualification of a graduating student to actually be able to safely enter the industry. The federal government, after years of urging from the trucking industry, has finally announced the adoption of a federal MELT standard to be implemented by 2020. Unfortunately, it took the Humboldt tragedy, 16 lives, and a public outcry to finally move this forward. Provincial government adoption and implementation of MELT programs will be something to keep an eye on, as driver licensing is most often a provincial matter. Ontario has a MELT program in place for some time, requiring students to complete a program which includes a minimum 103.5 hours of in-class and in-cab instruction. Since Humboldt, other provinces have either made the commitment to adopt a MELT program or begin development of a program. Unfortunately, British Columbia has been very slow to make a firm commitment to MELT, despite the leadership shown by other provinces and the common sense logic that says it's needed. Raising training and entry standards may on the surface seem counterintuitive. After all, if we're already facing a driver shortage, how can raising the requirements with a mandatory entry-level training standard possibly help to solve a driver shortage issue? A MELT program does a number of things. First, it increases the standard to a point that graduates are potentially qualified to take on entry-level positions in the industry and contribute safely. Currently, drivers trained to the minimum standard subscribed by ICBC or other provincial regulators to attain their Class 1 or Class 3 license are for the most part unemployable. This is both frustrating for the new worker, who expects to have ready access to employment based on the notion that drivers are in such short supply, and not helpful to trucking companies who are desperately seeking qualified drivers to do the work. What's of great concern are those few trucking companies who, out of desperation for drivers, lower their hiring standards and take these newly minted drivers and place them in a truck. Number two, having a MELT standard will raise the bar for those fringe companies who tend to cut corners. As in any industry, trucking has its short-sighted companies who fail to invest in driver training and have low hiring standards. These are often the same companies operating poorly maintained trucks, circumventing hours of service rules, and generally running substandard businesses. It is these companies who inevitably compromise public safety, hurt the perception of the industry, and perpetuate the myth that drivers generally are unskilled. Third, it levels the competitive playing field for trucking companies that are already making significant investments in operating a responsible business. These companies are investing in drivers with good training, pay, and benefits, as well as providing good equipment and implementing technology like ELDs. And if you want to read more about ELDs, we have a blog available on that. As well as telematics system to ensure their trucks and drivers are operating safely on the road. A MELT program will raise the floor, so to speak, and bring trucking companies operating at the fringes closer to the standards employed by the well-run companies in the industry, at least when it comes to employing trained, qualified, and safe drivers. Fourth, it improves safety. There's no question that when a truck is involved in an accident, the consequences can be devastating. Increasing the standards of becoming a professional driver will simply improve safety on the public roads. Fifth, it elevates the status of a professional driver. Like any career, the requirement to meet high standards to achieve the qualifications needed to become a professional driver does a number of things. First, it increases the professional driver's image of himself, returning a sense of pride to the industry and the occupation. Second, it increases the respect from others for having achieved a designation which is not easy to get. And third, it increases the value of the occupation. Like any supply-demand equation, limiting the availability of anything in demand naturally increases its price. In the short term, a MELT standard may actually reduce the availability of professional drivers. This means not only that the accredited drivers have the potential to earn more, but trucking companies have the opportunity to charge more to their customers as supply becomes more limited. At the end of the day, it would seem intuitive that professional drivers should undergo comprehensive training considering the complexities of operating a piece of equipment like a modern tractor-trailer unit. Continued lobbying for nationwide adoption of MELT standards is crucial to helping address the driver shortage crisis and improving public safety. In BC, we should expect nothing less of our provincial government for the good of the industry, the professional driver, and the general public. Thanks for joining me. We've got plenty of other blogs. If you're interested, I invite you to click one of the links to the right and below. Have a great day.